Hello and welcome to the Villa Park podcast. It's me, Rich, and I'm back with a very special show, one that I've been wanting to do for a little while now, focusing on, I guess, now the profit and sustainability rules, the potential transfer dealings that Aston Villa might have to do, and just to find out what might be the inside scoop on everything that's going on at Villa. So I thought, why not get one of the experts in? Why not get someone who is on the inside, who might have the inside track on what is going on? So I have brought in none other than the Midlands correspondent, Midlands football correspondent from the Daily Mail, Mr. Tom Collomosse. How are you doing, mate? Great to have you in.
I'm really well, Rich, and great to be back on the show again.
Great stuff, mate. Great stuff. Yes, friend of the channel. I think this might be your fourth or fifth time. We generally get you on when there might be some dealings going on. There might be some transfer talk to discuss. So, yeah, great to have you back in, mate. So, as I said, the profit and sustainability at the moment seems to be the buzzword for almost every club in the Premier League, and Aston Villa seem to be a team that are having to deal with it at the minute. So from your perspective, what is happening at the moment with Villa and trying to stay within this profit and sustainability and financial fair play regulations?
Well, I think we've known for a while that there's been an issue there in terms of meeting those regulations so they're not at risk of a charge and then potentially a points deduction, which is what happened to Nottingham Forest and Everton last season, could happen to Leicester this season. And like a lot of clubs in the league, they're not happy about the current rules. In fact, we wrote in the Daily Mail that they tried to get a change to the rules. So the current allowed loss is £105 million over a 3-year period. Feels like we've all got to become accountants at the moment, doesn't it?
Yes.
Villa wanted to push that up to 135 million. That was, you need a majority of 14 across the Premier League to achieve a change like that. And they were nowhere near doing it. But that, I think, told everyone that they had a problem there. And the best way to meet it is through player sales. Now, because the accounting period for the Premier League ends on June the 30th, I've been speaking to a few people, and June the 29th, June the 30th could almost feel like the real transfer deadline day this year, because there's a number of clubs who need to move on players before that time. And like everything else, you know, it's a buyer's market really in situations like these. So Villa have been aware for some time that they might have this issue, and you're looking around at players that they could sell. I think Douglas Luiz is one. Matty Cash is one, I think, he's being offered. That doesn't surprise me. And John Duran, it doesn't surprise me either. It doesn't ever feel like he's had the complete backing of Unai Emery. But I suppose the real fear is, if, you know, they don't get to where they want to do, are they going to have to be fending off hostile bids for Emiliano Martinez, Ollie Watkins, Ezri Konsa? Boubacar Kamara's not fit at the moment, but that level of player. So I think there's, you know, we've got 2.5 weeks of June left, and there's a heck of a lot to happen in that time, I think.
Yeah. So I guess that in that sense, then, with regards to this 2.5 weeks to go to the 29th, 30th of June, is it likely that, you know, a Douglas Luiz can be moved on, or a Matty Cash can be moved on, or are clubs going to maybe hold out and wait and see, and then potentially test the water with, like you say, an Emi Martinez or an Ollie Watkins type bid?
I think the problem, I speak to someone at Villa yesterday, is that the problem is not selling players. Villa have got a number of players who they can sell and who would be profitable for the PSR rules. So just to give a quick explainer, the best players to sell for PSR are those you either bought for not very much money or your homegrown players, because everything you make on the transfer can be booked as a profit. Whereas if you signed somebody for, you know, say Moussa Diaby, there's kind of no point Villa selling somebody like that this summer, because they signed him for £45 million on a 5-year contract. That means that he's now worth £36 million for accounting purposes. So if they sold him now for, I don't know, 50, that's not a huge profit. Whereas if they sold a fit Jacob Ramsey for 45 million, that's 45 million profit. So it's not a problem for them to sell. The problem is that every club now knows they need to sell.
Yeah.
And it's like if you're buying a house or a car or anything, isn't it? If you know that the person, you know, you're buying a house, if you know that, or the person needs to get out because somebody who lives in that house is taking a job abroad or something like that, well, you offer low, don't you? And that this is not going to be an issue just for Villa. There's a few clubs who are trying to, you know, get their books in order in time for June the 30th. So I don't think that moving the players will be a problem. It's just that they might have to accept less than what they think these players are worth to fulfill this, to solve this accounting problem.
Yeah, no, it definitely makes sense. And I'm going to say that with other clubs potentially having to do the same, is it becoming like a race against time, and almost, as you said, like another sort of dummy deadline day to try and race through a sale that's going to hopefully help you not get points deductions or further sanctions?
Yeah, I think it will be. And I think we saw the kind of test case for this last summer with Brennan Johnson, who Nottingham Forest sold to Tottenham for about £50 million at the end of August. So that was in the accounting year that we're in now, that's about to end on June 30th. Nottingham Forest were charged with breaching PSR for the accounting year 2022, 2023. Now, in their appeal against that, they said, look, we could have sold Brennan Johnson in June to Brentford for 35 million and it would have corrected that problem. But overall, it would have been worse for our financial position because we would have been selling him for less than what he's worth. The Premier League, they might have taken that argument into account, but ultimately Forest was still penalised points. So that's been a test case for all the clubs. And now they know that there is this kind of hard and fast June deadline, and they can't really, you know, Villa's equivalent will be perhaps Jacob Ramsey, who's another academy player. They can't really do the kind of ifs, buts, and maybes. Oh, well, you know, we could have sold it, but then we could have got this. It's not going to cut any ice. So I think, again, I remember speaking to somebody, sporting director of Premier League club, this will be a year or more ago, perhaps a year ago, and he said he'd never known the market like it was in terms of everybody was just talking about PSR. You know, they weren't really talking about, oh, what do you need? You know, do you need this position, or do you need to get rid of these types of players? It was just, oh, well, how do we fulfill this? And yeah, it's going to dominate, I think. And then you probably find, I think that July will be quite quiet. But because it's effectively the start of a new accounting year. But yeah, it could get quite hairy, I think, between now and the end of June.
Interesting. So we know the main player at the moment that is linked to a specific deal, shall we say. I know Matty Cash has been talked about. I know John Duran has been talked about, but Douglas Luiz looks like, from our perspective, the potential most likely. And also involved in that are potentially Weston McKennie and Samuel Illing Jr. from Juventus. What do you know about that? And I guess how far along is that potential deal?
Well, I think it's noticeable. It's been very much. It's been pushed quite hard from the Italian end. Juventus are also in need of. They don't have the funds just to buy Douglas Luiz, and they have a problem with McKennie and Samuel Lilling Jr. in that they're staying for one more year, so they go for free. What happened is that Monchi, who really I think needs to start earning his corn, by the way, but that's another discussion, has gone to Italy effectively to say, look, you know, how about him? How about him? How about him? And that's how they've sort of started to talk about Douglas Luiz and these two players from Juventus. If I were Villa, and I'm sure it's what they will be doing, that you'd be trying to start an auction around Douglas Luiz, wouldn't you, to try to get that price up for the PSR purposes, because this is a player who not too long ago they were turning down 35-40 million from Arsenal, and then you look at last summer, Caicedo, McAllister, Declan Rice, all going for a lot of money, and in normal circumstances Villa would probably think Douglas Luiz is worth around that. But that's I think where part of their anger lies, in that you kind of have to base your transfer policy around these rules from their point of view, rather than what might be best for the club, which is of course what the co-owner Nassef Sawiris said when he was interviewed by the Financial Times this week. Yeah,
it is a frustrating one, because like you said there, Douglas Luiz in ordinarily might be worth, I wouldn't say the Declan Rice category, but certainly 70-80 million. Now you're looking at what a valuation that Juventus are trying to potentially talk about 65 million euros adding into these players as well, so 20 million plus these players. And like you say, you're almost shortchanging what you potentially got just to kind of satisfy the rules, and that doesn't seem to be the. And I talked about this on our fans forum the other day, the unintended consequences of making these decisions like profit and sustainability. That's one that you've highlighted. And then the second one is you're having to sell potential youth products just to be able to then offset the cost against the debt for the next 3 years, or your accounts for the next 3 years. And that again doesn't seem like the intentions of trying to tighten up the rules. And you've said there, Jacob Ramsey still, I guess, isn't off the table in terms of what he might be able to bring in.
That's right. And you look at someone like Conor Gallagher as well, don't you? Who doesn't want to leave Chelsea, was one of Chelsea's best players last season, but because he's homegrown, to use your phrase, he's on the table now, especially with only a year left. I mean, what you say for the counter argument is the clubs knew that these rules were in place. They knew they existed. It's not as though someone suddenly said, oh, okay, look, here's these rules and we haven't told you about them and now you've got to follow them. But I think there was quite a lot of surprise across the league, I think, when Villa made that proposal to increase the allowable losses. Not that they made it, because it's not an unreasonable proposal, but they made it 3 weeks before the end of the accounting period, because it just tells every other club, oh, goodness me, you need to sell that. You need to sell fast. You need to, and that's, it's almost like playing a card game and revealing your hand, isn't it? So I think, that there might be ways in which when they look across the, look back, they might have done things differently. But certainly the point of view of the current regime is that when they arrived, there were a lot of players there who weren't going to be able to come on the journey with them if they were going to get to where Unai Emery wants to take them. You're looking at Coutinho, you're looking at Aaron Ramsey, you're looking at Keenan Davis. In fact, somebody sent me a list of these players, and when they turned up, they had to find homes for them, for want of a better word, to find ways of moving them on. And the argument of this regime is that they've been, tidying up the mess of the last regime. Of course, the last regime would argue, well, hang on a minute, we sold Jack Grealish for £100 million. That was the absolute dream FFP deal. Matty Cash is worth more than he was. Emi Martinez is worth more than he was. Konsa's worth more than he was. So, you know, there's two sides to every story, isn't there? It's not like, I think Johan Lange generally did a really good job, and Christian Burslow on that side of the club. But yeah, the immediate issue is now, isn't it? And they need to find a way through it. I'm sure they will, but they just might come out of it feeling a bit bruised and a bit sore.
Yeah. So officially the transfer window opens, I think, Friday the 14th so tomorrow, as we're recording on Thursday. So what are you hearing from inside the club? Are you expecting like official bids to go in for some of our players, like pretty much straight away, or are you expecting it to go right down to the wire? What are the kind of rumblings going on inside the club?
I mean, look, I'd love to say that I know exactly what's going to happen. I don't, you know,
Yeah.
but I would probably expect both. I mean, you know, it's Douglas Luiz. There's clearly a deal in the works there, and I think Duran is almost a red herring, really, in PSR terms. I just think that he's not one for Unai Emery.
Yeah,
I think it's that.
Yeah.
I think he just wants to move him on so he can get another forward in, and he'd be wanting to do that regardless of the sort of prevailing economic situation across the league. Matty Cash is a bit similar, not similar in terms of, you know, I think Unai Emery like admires him as a pro and has played him, but probably thinks he can do better in that position. Probably thinks he can upgrade. So those are the players, and Luiz is kind of the jewel. You know, the Ramsey situation is complicated by his fitness record as well. You know, it's a problematic injury record last year. But yeah, if I were a Villa fan, I'd be most worried about, you know, biggish, late-ish bids coming in for, you know, Watkins, Konsa, Martinez, maybe not so much because, you know, most of the top teams who would sign him have goalkeepers, and signing him would then give you a problem of a goalkeeper to move on. But when a club's vulnerable, as everybody knows Villa is, that's something they've got to be braced for.
Yeah. You mentioned Monchi needing to earn his corn or needing to earn his money a little bit before. What do you envisage from that? What do you kind of take away from that?
Look, I think Monchi's got a fabulous reputation that's been built largely on what he did at Sevilla the first time when he signed. Dani Alves was the jewel in the crown, but did a lot of really smart deals. Dani Alves signed for very little, sold for a fortune to Barcelona, and became one of the, you know, the best right backs of his time in the game. Then he went to Roma, checkered record, I'd say, in terms of recruitment there. Second spell at Sevilla wasn't the equal of his first. And I just think that here, if you look at who's been signed, it's Alex Moreno's left back in his 30s. All right, okay, fine. You know, but he's a player they knew. That's not a gem that they've unearthed, is it? You look at the targets now, you know, they're not players who you've suddenly gone and got. Oh goodness, wow, they've signed him and he's suddenly become much more valuable. The kind of poster boy for this era is Morgan Rogers. But I think as much as anything, Morgan Rogers was an Emery signing. I think.
I was just about to say that he spotted him. Yeah, he spotted him in the FA Cup.
And then of course you get the retrospective. Oh, yeah, we've been analysing him for a while. Well, of course they're all going to say that. Oh, he's played well.
Yeah.
You know, so to sign him for initial $8.5 million is amazing business. You know, already he's probably worth, you know, 4 times that. You know, 4 or 5 times that. So I think in a situation like Villa are in, their best bet is to try and do that again. Those kinds of deals. There's gold in the EFL. There really is.
Yeah, I've said it for so long. There's so many good players in the Championship that look at Adam Wharton, like what he's done at Crystal Palace. It's incredible, and like you see how good he is. And I do think Emery, and maybe this is led from Monchi, I do think he likes that profile of player. Like you're looking at Illing Jr. there, maybe a rough diamond, 20 years old, played some first team football. Nedeljkovic, who's coming in, played some first team football. So maybe he likes that where they've had some first team experience elsewhere. He can bring them in. They've played against men. They've been in the dressing room. They've done all that sort of stuff. Then Emery can polish them up and potentially, make them into better players. But yeah, I definitely agree with you. We probably need to see more of that, or just at least links that are more kind of prevalent in that, rather than the tired links of like Guendouzi and Abraham and players like that. I mean, again, how much truth are you seeing in those potential links? Is there?
Well, look, there's when they're reported by really credible journalists, so I've got no reason to not think they're true. It's more the wisdom of the deals, isn't it? Tammy Abraham, really good first season at Roma, second season, not so much, and then really bad injury that ruined his last season. And there's always a question mark about how well a player is going to come back from something like that. And he's in his later 20s now. Guendouzi a bit the same. I think is not an old player by any means, but mid-career certainly. And yeah, I just wonder about because history suggests, doesn't it, that when a team sneaks into the that's not fair to say sneaks into the Champions League. When a team who doesn't usually get in the Champions League gets in it, it's very hard then to go and do it again and again and again. So it's probably a season only with the Champions League money. And so you need to plan for not getting it, I think. And that's where deals like Morgan Rogers are really smart. To be fair, someone like Illing Jr., if they brought him in, if he came off, would be really smart. But yeah, it's funny, isn't it, at the time, because you feel that such a fabulous season last year, and it's barely ended, but it's been quite an unsettling, uncertain time since, in terms of you got an owner saying that, he might lodge a formal complaint against the league. You've got the club trying to change the rules. You've got kind of scrambling to sell players to meet this kind of what they say is an arbitrary deadline.
The premium seating at the ground and all that sort of
stuff. Yeah,
that's
right. And you would be closer to this than me, but it doesn't feel like, if you take aside from the performance on the pitch, it doesn't feel like, the fans' general feeling towards the club is perhaps as good as you might expect. You could correct me if I'm wrong. When
I'd say mixed. I'd say there's a reluctant acceptance to the increase in pricing and some of the changes that are being made. I think where there's some grievance is that there's not a great deal of communication ahead of time. It's almost like these decisions are made and then it's like, oh, you're just going to have to put up or shut up almost. But I think sometimes it's tempered with the fact that increased kit deal with Adidas, increased sponsorship deal, and those type of things are kind of, I guess, tempering people's feelings a little bit. However, yeah, with this profit and sustainability, it'd just be nice to get out the back of this. If we can get out the back of it with Douglas Luiz, who I've said is probably the one player out of the top stars that I would be, happier with losing, especially if we can complement it with two other signings. And then go into the targets that we've wanted to go for, because I know you did an article a week or two ago about sort of saying he's after fullbacks, he's after wide players, he's after a forward player. So it'd be nice for us to actually go for the targets that we want, as opposed to trying to put off this profit and sustainability cloud over our heads. So yeah, and is that still on the agenda for Emery in terms of those targets?
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. But as you said it there, I think everything at the moment is on getting through this. I think Ross Barkley is a deal that they'll probably do, but you know, it's an interesting one. That I think 3-year contract to a player who, you know, had a great season at Luton last year, but I think he's not necessarily the most reliable of characters. And I wonder if he's one of those players who, to thrive, he needs to be the focal point of the team.
Yeah.
And for the thing to be built around him, for him to be an automatic starter, which, you know, Luton in an attacking sense had to be, because he was such a high standard than the rest of them. You're not going to get that at Aston Villa. You know, I don't think he's someone who's necessarily going to produce brilliantly if he's just a squad player. So we'd have to see how that plays out. But yeah, it's interesting times, isn't it? It's strange times.
It is.
We said for a lot of clubs, and it'll just be fascinating to see where they are on July the 1st.
Yeah, it is. There's never a dull moment. I mean, I've done more shows over the last couple of weeks than I did when the season was on, just because of all these rumours and all the drama that's going on. So, yeah, it's really good to get an insight from you, though, Tom, in terms of, you know, some potential inside knowledge and just the kind of logistics that have to go on to try and balance it up. So, yeah, thank you very much for your time. What's happening with you over the next few weeks? Are you covering the Euros? Are you or are you kind of?
No, I won't be. Just Villa and the other teams around here will be keeping me busy as usual. So yeah, I'm sure that'll be high on the agenda.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely look out for that. And yeah, you're on Twitter. I know you're on Twitter. Is it at Tom Collomosse? Is that right?
That's right, at Tom Collomosse. Yeah.
Good stuff. Right, guys, thank you very much. As I say, thank you very much to Tom. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure you hit that like button. We are pushing on past 4,100 subscribers, on the road to 5K. So make sure you hit the like button. Comment down below your thoughts and do subscribe if you're new to the channel. We'll be back with plenty more shows over the next few weeks. Transfer rumors, fans forums, you name it. So make sure you keep your eyes open for the shows that we're doing. Thank you everyone for watching, and as always, remember, we all follow the Villa.